write-up on Through the Bengal Tiger from Matthew Brune talking about some injuries that LSU football has recovering from. I didn't quite realize the bug that LSU football had injury-wise. Obviously, you know the couple from last year, whether it's Perk, Guillory, Whitweeks, guys like that. But some of these transfers coming off of injuries. Kyle Parker was hurt last season. Lloyd, what's your level of concern for the football team as these guys are recovering from these injuries?
Well, I think the first one that everybody thinks of is probably Weeks, right? Like I think it's the last one you saw. And then so my level of concern is not high. It's just the guys that you haven't seen. Like for Nick Anderson, obviously sat out all of last year, but I think that was more of a long play.
Right.
Like I want to keep my eligibility. I don't want to play at Oklahoma anymore. I'm going into the transfer portal, so I'm not going to play. Like Jakeem Jackson, I don't know.
Yep.
Like he start one game that was out the entire year. Like I don't know how many of these guys, the newcomers, are coming over that are quote unquote injured because they had to be in order to sit out. Like a LeBron not playing in the All-Star game, he wasn't hurt.
Anthony Davis's last season with the Pelicans seemed
like
you sitting out for a trade.
So I'm not concerned really about any of these. Like you would expect Jacoby and Guillory to be able to come back. We had him in here. He's already had surgery. He was scooting around in good spirits. Like he's not – there seems to be no setback so far. He's ready to get the boot off, and I think that is where he is time frame-wise. I mean, Perk, it's freak. So
yes.
It's usually like Adrian Peterson level of regeneration, I would imagine, just because of the type of athlete that he is.
Right.
And you expect if he's 90% of Harold Perkins, I'm good with it. But I think he's going to come back to be 100%. Kyle Parker, I mean, I know how tough he is and how much he wants to play and how much this sucks for him because he was battling injury.
Right.
Kept playing, kept forcing his way like almost into the lineup because you couldn't get Chris Hilton right, and then tears his triceps. So that's a little bit of that's a legitimate injury.
Yes.
That I think is going to take a little bit longer to recover. So I'd hate for him to get lost in the shuffle of things because he's not going to be able to play. But then you have Destin Hill also on this list, and from everything I've heard from Shea, he looks phenomenal. Like, that's his sleeper pick for somebody to make an impact that nobody's really talking about. Former Edna Carr kid, like obviously had a weird situation at Florida State where he sat out, I think, 2 years. Played a little bit last year, hits the transfer portal, comes back home to Louisiana. But Shea said he looks phenomenal. Like, looks every bit the part of being a legitimate, like, what he was out of high school, a high 4-star recruit. So if that's the case, that's where you have to feel for Kyle Parker a little bit because you've added
Barry Brown,
Nick Anderson, Dustin Hill. Chris Hilton feels like he's back a smooth 23 miles an hour.
Aaron
Anderson. And all of these things are good things.
Right.
Like, you're loaded offensively.
Yes. Well, and that to me is where and obviously go check the write-up out on 3, the Bengal Tiger from Matthew Brune. But that to me is where, my stress level isn't too high with these injuries, is because this is the deepest roster LSU's had under BK. Whether it's the high school classes over the past, this transfer portal class, the retention that they've been able to have. This is such a deep roster. And when you talk about some of these injuries with, whether it's receivers coming back and things like that, there's so many guys that can make an impact. Barry and Brown, Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton. Those are 3 guys that could very well start. You still got Xavier. You can go down the list. But it is interesting to see the amount of names that are on this injury list. So make sure you go check out that write-up. But I honestly think, depth being the strength of this roster, my level of concern is not too high. I think Perk obviously will recover well, make an impact. Whitweeks, to me, the Whitweeks is the one that resonates with me because, from that injury, I don't know are we going to see him in spring football? LSU should be a no rush, have Weeks back spring or the summer.
I don't
make sure you can
so.
go for the fall. So that to me is my only kind of, not really concern, but just kind of, okay, like take a step back and think about it, is that you're not going to see Witt until fall camp, really. And now I expect Witt to slide right back in and make it happen and be, just fine. But that's a lot of football that's going to be missed, from spring to summer and then into fall camp. He'll be back. That's kind of just a making things work where all of spring it's been this group of guys. Well, now Witt's back, throwing him back in, make sure he's comfortable and he's healthy. Kind of, that's a lot of things to juggle. That's my only kind of, I guess, finger on the pulse is how is that going to work out? What? The Witt coming back for fall, missing spring, obviously recovering from that injury, but then getting mixed back in with the guys.
He's been around the team. Obviously, you see him like giving speeches still, and like clearly being the leader that you think that he would be. I would not be surprised to see him probably don the 18 this year, which it just feels right. Like you've already seen people make that push, so he's clearly involved with the team still. But I'm not worried about a week's being prepared for war. Like that's just kind of who he is. He's still, like I said, he's still been around, and he'll be fine.
Well, less of the Witt part, more of like the team. Like I think you're bringing Perk back into the mix. Obviously, that's going to be a process through spring. Well, now you're going to have to do Witt and Perk together in fall, and just
Oh, okay, it's like the continuity,
there? Right?
I guess if you wanted to, because you haven't seen it yet, like you saw it in spurts, but it was never the focal point of your defense. Which now with bringing Perk back and putting him at star and seeing how you're going to utilize him, but then see how they play together, yeah, sure, I could see that. But I think if you put two really talented guitarists together, at some point they're going to make pretty good music. Right. So that's kind of where I sit on it. But yeah, it would be better if they were able to practice together and get a feel and just kind of that energy that it would bring. But I think just because of what Perkins' assignment is and how, I guess, I don't want to say not as involved with the linebacking crew because of what he's doing. It feels like they won't be playing off each other as much as maybe as you think because of how he's going to be utilized in the star, which I think is obviously those two out there on the field together, as long as it's for week one, that's a nightmare scenario for any offense to where that speed everywhere and it doesn't stop. Like from the front four to your back seven, or like LSU's defense should be good, and the second year in the system, you've seen what that can do.
Right.
For obviously, you've seen how it went the other way
for the offense.
Or I was going to say how with the other way,
the detriment.
I would expect with the amount of talent brought in and brought back, and people being in the system for the second year, and who you have as the coach and who you have on the staff.
Right.
I expect them to be very good.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I mean, and when it comes to that, this discussion, my trust resides with Blake Baker to take care of business and have this prepared. I think he is obviously worth every penny that LSU spent, and this will probably be his main, one of his biggest assignments is making this work, because these are two integral pieces to your team, and you have to find a way to make sure that it works and works well, because it's going to lead to a lot of wins. So I'm excited to see what they look like in spring camp, but with these injuries, the continuity thing to me is probably the biggest storyline. Is obviously you're getting these transfer guys in. You got high school guys in that are going to come and make an impact. And then now you got to get these guys coming back from injury at different time periods mixed back in. That's a lot of moving pieces. And I don't want to be too, sunshine in my brain looking at the names on this roster and not understanding that this is going to be a lot of things moving and shaking that LSU's got to make sure they take care of. Chili asks, which freshman are you guys excited about the most? Most in all caps. Lloyd? I'm assuming LSU football.
Yeah, for LSU football, I mean, give me the low-hanging fruit.
Take it. Pick it?
No.
No?
Harlem. Barry. I think that you would like to see the development of that running back room continue because you know what you have in Caden Durham, but you lose what you really knew what you had in Williams, as he was a mainstay on that LSU offense and somebody that always got better towards the latter half of the season in games that are important. You knew you could count on him, and it felt like he was almost underutilized last year because you were trying to find a run game, and he didn't click early. But then later on, it became like 5.5 yards a carry, 6 yards a carry, but you weren't really handing the football all that often. But whenever he played well, and now you lose that, just whether it be what he did on third down, run blocking, pass blocking, all of the little things. Like, he was paramount to what you were trying to do offensively and just from a consistent side. And now to have Caden Durham step into that every down back. That's what he's going to be.
Yeah.
So if you don't see the emergence of Caleb Jackson, and I don't even know how much that matters. I think that because of Harlan Berry's skill set, he's going to have plays for him, to where he'll be able to touch the football, whether it be split out wide at running back. I'm extremely excited to see how they exploit his ability to kind of change games with one touch of the football. And I do think that's you see the move from Juwan Johnson from running back to quarterback.
Yes.
Obviously they know it, and you have JT Lindsey coming in. I think that'll be interesting. One of these guys is going to get big time, the opportunity to have big time carries. But I think Harlan Berry, regardless if it's he's splitting carries, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's going to play, and I'm just excited to see how they play him, because the more you watch him, the more it's hard to ignore how much he looks like Reggie.
Yes. My guys, I'm going to go with a sneaky one here. Mine's Damian Shanklin. I think that obviously the edge rusher position for LSU is one that's going to be talked about a lot. You're losing a lot of production from that room when you're talking about Swinson, Savion, Womack obviously hitting the portal. Relaford's your only guy coming back with 50 or more snaps. You've got transfers coming in. I think Shanklin's going to be a stud. And I'm excited to see how much, how many looks he gets early on in the season, and how much time he actually gets to go. I'm excited to see